For more on this, we're joined by John Blaxland. He is a Professor of International Security and Intelligence Studies at the Australian National University. John Blaxland, always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Matt.
Clearly, police and ASIO are putting this up in lights, saying that they've done a great job to find this pair. But how significant really is this arrest, do you think?
Well, it is very significant because we haven't seen an announcement like this of an arrest of a espionage suspect for many years, in fact. If you want to kind of go back in time, we go back to perhaps originally to the Petrov defections when Vladimir and Evdokia Petrov defected in the mid-1950s. That led to the Royal Commission on Espionage. But they were clearly involved in the members of the KGB, the Russian intelligence service. A few years later, 1963, Ivan Skripov, also with the KGB, tries to recruit an Australian lady to work for him to help pass a burst transmitter to a suspected Soviet illegal operating in Adelaide. That Soviet illegal was never caught, but the idea of a Soviet or a Russian person operating in Australia at the behest of Russian directions from Moscow, it's not unprecedented, but it goes back a while since we had someone on this scale. But a couple of decades ago, we had a couple of people wanting to sell information to the highest bidder, people like Lapis and Wispelair, and a few years before that, George Sedil fell under a cloud for accusations of being passing information, although the court case never proved that he actually had passed information to the Russians. But the Russians are known to have been interested in collecting information from Australia for many, many years.
So the woman in question here, the 40-year-old woman, a private in the army, she's an information systems analyst. What does that mean? What sort of information would she have had access to as part of that role?
So a systems analyst is somebody who's operating the back end of the ones and zeros, the hardware of the computer system, and would have access to, a bit like an Edward Snowden, to high-level administrative controls to whatever system she was operating on. Now, of course, in the Australian system, we have various levels of systems, and I'm not quite sure exactly which level of system she had access to, but there's the Defence Protected Network, there's a secret network, and there's a top secret network. And of course, those three networks operate at different levels of lockdown, if you like, and a degree of difficulty of access and level of trust and security clearance to access those systems. I mean, I don't know the details of this case. I suspect, being an Army private, she's probably accessed the Defence Protected Network, which is the lower classification one. Nonetheless, it contains a trove of information that, if she has accessed and if she was able to pass it to the Russians, potentially has considerable military application.
So what sort of information would the Russians be wanting in that space?
So there's a couple of things they could be wanting. I'm surmising from my own research on how espionage works and the history of ASIO, but they like to, piece together a story about a person. They may be looking to prioritise who they might want to appeal to, who they might want to set a honey trap for. I teach a course called Honeypots and Overcoats. It's all about, it's not all about that, but the idea of espionage and entrapment is very much part of the mix of espionage, and the idea of actually picking out the data that you need to effectively select the right candidate, the right vulnerabilities of a candidate, are the kinds of things that a large amount of data on individuals, from records, personal files, particularly human resources files, about career performance or pitfalls or medical challenges. That kind of information can be used very effectively to prise open doors or access to information and to compromise people who might be in prominent decision-making appointments.
What do we take from the fact that these are dual nationals, and not just dual Australian nationals with any country, but Russian nationals? Is there an issue with vetting here, even though Mike Burgess seems to suggest that there isn't? So
it's very interesting because the vetting procedures went through quite a transformation after the late 1990s with the Lapis and Wispelair cases, which people can Google these people and find out what happened. But essentially, they were people who were recruited, they were vetted, but not rigorously vetted. They were given jobs that were probably could have been subject to a higher degree of scrutiny, and then they were given largely unfettered access to records that they were able to extract from the building themselves. And so what we've seen since then is a tightening up of the vetting procedures and a tightening up of the procedures for access to buildings. So even the inspection of bags is now a routine procedure for people. So you expect that now if you're going to work in one of these secret intelligence bodies. So that's a really significant development. Well, what's happened is the number of people requiring it with the digital revolution, with the digital expansion of the cybersecurity space, of the way that the digital world has expanded its remit across intelligence and across society writ large, has meant you need a lot more people who've got security clearances. And having the system work to keep up and then refresh security clearances is actually proving very difficult. So, the procedures are meant to be that you have regular reviews of your security clearance to make sure that you're still got the right frame of mind, that you haven't been compromised by money, ideology, coercion, or some kind of MICE is the acronym they use for the motives that people have for wanting to sell secrets or give away secrets of the country that they're a citizen of. But in this case, of course, we've got people who've got citizenship in two countries. So the ideology, the motivations are, hard to quite discern from a distance.
Very briefly, John Blaxland, do you think an incident like this, because these individuals are dual nationals, could cast doubt on these plans to allow dual nationals in the Australian Defence Force?
So far the plans for allowing dual nationals into the Defence Force include Five Eyes countries only, and I think that's pretty tight. I think that's pretty safe. They all have pretty much the same kind of standards for vetting and a high degree of interoperability and acknowledgement of each other's standards and procedures. I don't see this having that effect. Russia has always been a country that Australia has been wary about, going back to the early days of the Cold War. And even during the Second World War, when we were allied to them, they were spying on us. This is the whole reason why ASIO was established, was to actually identify the nest of spies who'd been active in the Second World War and who remained active after the Second World War.
It's a fascinating case, and no doubt we'll ask you about it again in the future when we learn more. John Blaxland, thanks for coming in.
Good to be on the program, Matt.